welcome everyone. This is another episode of the Caffeinated Contractor. Today we're going to talk about managing your expectations when you're meeting with your contractor when they come out for your estimate. And I have my friend today, Pablo. Pablo's here with me today to help me out with this episode. Pablo is out here in Houston with me. We work together in elevation construction. So this is his first time on the show. Pablo, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. So I am the new field operations specialist for elevation construction out here in Houston, Texas. I have been doing this line of work, contracting and construction, since about 2017, 2018. I came from multifamily, so from property management before that. I was in sales and management, but then started in the facility, the maintenance side of it. So doing the flips and turns on the apartments, and slowly but surely kind of worked my way up and gained a lot of experience over the last few years, especially being in Houston and all the different storms and all the roofing and the different work that we have here in Houston. Kind of let me be out in the field and gain a lot of experience in the different trades that have to do with construction.
My phone rings right in the middle of that. Sorry about that. It's amateur hour here. Sorry, man.
All good.
But yeah, so Pablo and I met probably about 8 months ago or so, right, over at BNI. And Pablo is working, he has his own company. And after a while, we're like, hey, we're kind of serving the same area. We get along really well. We've been trying to work together on some projects. And we're like, why don't we just get together and just make it official and we're working together. So that's what we're doing on Elevation. And Pablo is his strengths are my weaknesses. So it's great to have him on the team. So I'm glad you're here. And Pablo's going to be here a lot on this podcast because he knows a lot about construction. He knows a lot about project management. And he's also our sales guy too. He is a I in the disc, which means he's very extroverted. He likes to talk to people. So
I was going to mention that. I was like, I couldn't remember what the name of that test was. And I was like, I think we found that out from taking that test. So
the test really just confirmed what we already knew, right?
It sure did.
Yeah. So it's awesome. So today we're going to talk about managing the expectation. So this show really is geared towards the customer, to help the customer, to educate the customer and help them out with whatever education that they need. Sometimes, obviously they don't do this for a living. They get a little overwhelmed, maybe a little scared, frightened because they hear horror stories from contractors screwing them over. So our mission here with this podcast is to help them out with the education piece and to give them tools to help them with their contractor. And if they're in the Houston area, obviously it builds trust and hopefully they consider us for their projects. So since you go out and you talk to a lot of people, and I've done this myself too, we came up with 9 points that you want to consider whenever you meet with your contractor that you want to take into consideration for your expectation. And I would say the first and foremost thing, the first thing you want to do is you got to know what you want to do. You have to know what your vision is, right? Because if you don't have a vision, we have no idea what you want, and it's going to be very difficult. Obviously, we're going to take some time to try to pull some of that out of you. To see what you like and try to gear the project towards that. But you definitely need to know what you want, ideally, before you even call us out, right, Pablo?
Yeah, I would say it's a good idea. And over the years, I've had experiences on both sides where it's been, you have those clients that it's like, make our job so easy because they know exactly what they want. They know the colors. I mean, they know the countertop. They've actually gone out and looked at the different showrooms and went to Sherwin-Williams and picked out the colors. And there's a lot of different models that you can use for example, like Pinterest. Pinterest is a great tool for clients to go to first and look at some ideas, even if they're on that border where they don't know 100% on what they want. It's something to where hey, us as contractors, if we have something that we can visualize and we have that, even if it's not the same color, if it's not the same whatever, but we have a form, that we're hey, this is kind of the idea of what I was having for the space. And then obviously they just hand the ball off to us and then we create it. We make their dreams reality, is exactly. Really what I like to say. But then on the other spectrum of it too, is you have those clients that have no idea, right? And they haven't gone and taking that step to maybe go to the showroom or go to that But they're like, yeah, we just want you to like, just do whatever you want. But it doesn't really work that way, because it's like, it's like we can't do whatever that we want. We're not the ones that are going to be living in that house. Or, for instance, if it's on the commercial side, we're not the ones that are going to be operating that business the whole time. So it's like we have, we have our knowledge and our experience to be able to put into the construction, and yes, some of the design to it, because we have from our own experiences in the past of like what works in that application and what doesn't. But it is a team effort between the client and the contractor of like working together and being, hey, this is what we want at the end. But it takes definitely from both sides to be able to make that vision become.
Exactly. Yeah, you hit it hit the nail on the head with the team word. Is I really feel like we're an extension of their team. They're bringing us on, and we are there to serve them and help them win. And the win really is a good product at the end. And for us at Elevation, our win is not just a good product, but the experience as well. So moving on, maybe we could probably spend a whole show on that part. But moving on to the next one is being honest with your expectations. Now, what I mean by that is, if you're going to call out a contractor, you call us out there, we go to your house, we talk to you about your project. It'd be good if you tell us like, hey, look, like for example, I went to a house probably about a month ago, and she goes, hey, look, I'm not going to do this project probably for another year. So, don't rush on the estimate. I just need to price it out so I know how much money I need to save. That was perfect because expectation was right there. Yeah. Some people just like are kicking tires, and if you're kicking tires, that's cool. Let's just have a general conversation instead of us spending a lot of time in the background doing the estimates and trying to get teams ready. And then we give you an estimate and you're like, oh no, I've just kind of seen how much it costs. So being open about your expectations about what you plan on doing and how committed you are to this project.
Yeah. I think
what do you think about that?
That's correct right there. Is, sometimes I think it's, the client is 100% is focused on like that, hey, I want this done, but there's what can be done, there's budgets involved, there's time involved, there's, for instance, right now, we're in December and it's like, hey, are you really going to start a project this month with the holidays coming up?
Exactly. Right.
Have, so those are things that, maybe sometimes they don't play, they don't, think about maybe before they reach out to a contractor at that. Is this the right time to reach out to the contractor? Or maybe should I wait a month and use that time, like for the bullet point that we just hit was like, come up with the idea and use that time. Don't ever rush into a project, right? Don't rush, to get everybody together if it's not all there. And then on our side, and it's not anybody's fault. Everybody gets excited when they really want something, it's like opening up that new pair of shoes after Christmas or whatever. You're just like, yes, this is what I want, and it's exactly what I want. But it's, is you also have to, the clients also, just as how we respect their time and their, their efforts and everything is it should, reciprocate back to us. Hey, most of us, we don't make our money until that project is done, so exactly. It's like our time, our efforts, the other teams and the subs and all that go into it. And if we're getting a designer involved or anything like that, it's like, you have to think about those things, I think, before you get into like, like this, I want this done right now. Or, it's like you said, is be honest, there's nothing wrong. I think honesty is the key principle on this is, right. If you're going to do a job in 3 months, then, hey, we want to help you in 3 months. If you're going to do it in a year, hey, I want to help you in a year. We're still going to be around no matter what. But just be honest with us so we know, like, hey, can we kind of, put this in a queue to where, like, hey, we have a couple others that they're wanting their projects done this month, and we know that they want their projects done this month, to where we're not kind of, pushing anybody around or anything like that to make that happen. And then at the end of the day, it's like, man, we did all that. And it's just like, they're not even ready to do the project for another year. And even if they're ready to do it within that time frame.
Exactly. Yeah. So just being open and honest, because like what you were saying, it works both ways, right? We have to do it on our end, and it has to come from the consumer's end as well. The next one is kind of a touchy topic because it's about money, and a lot of people don't like to talk about budget, right? and I understand, right? If we come out and say, hey, what's your budget on this project? What are you looking to spend? It's like, gosh, if I tell them my bottom line here, if I tell them how much I'm willing to spend, they're going to take a $30,000 project and turn it all the way up to the top of my budget, right? I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm sure there's contractors that take advantage of that. But if you do your due diligence and you find a good contractor that have their prices set, talking about your budget is going to be helpful because it's going to help us understand your budget constraints. So, for example, if we're coming out and we're talking about your kitchen and you want to do a kitchen remodel and you have these grand ideas, that's great. And we'll price it out. But if we're pricing out a $200,000 kitchen and you only have an $80,000 budget, that would have been a good conversation to have at the beginning. What are your thoughts on that, Pablo?
Yeah, I mean, it's, it is a sensitive, subject, I think, to talk about with some people, it's like, hey, I don't want just my budget to be this, or I'm,
Right.
maybe scared to share that information or anything like that. But I mean, in all reality, I know at least for us, like you said, we can't talk about other contractors or anything like that. But I mean,
Right.
Our markup is our markup, right? We're not going
Right.
to increase our markup because we know that, hey, this person has a $500,000 budget or,
Right.
anything like that. Materials are still going to cost the same. You know what I mean? Our pricing is still going to cost the same. So we just give you the most bang for your buck, right? So like that's and in all reality, we can't do that unless we have a realistic expectation of like, hey, this is how much that you really, really want to spend and can spend at the end of the day, just like how it's like we were talking about, expectations, is you got to be, you have to be honest with us so we know how to manage your project and what we can all put into it from there. So that way, at the end of the day, it's a product that they're happy with and that we can be honest, with them as well and say, hey, this is what we can give you for whatever X amount of dollars and that.
Yeah, exactly. And the way, I mean, I could just speak for our company is that, if someone gives us a high budget and we hear the budget, we're like, oh yeah, we could totally do that within that budget. The way we think is, well, they got like an $80,000 budget, but we think this is going to be about a $50K project. In our minds, it's like, hey, they got $30,000 more. What else do you want to do, if anything? Or do you just want to save the money, right? It just leaves opportunity for you to actually build even more if you wanted to, right? So, like I said, we can only speak for our company. That's how we approach things, but definitely talking about the budget is very important. And the other part of it is too, it's, when we give out the estimate, and we haven't had that budget conversation, which happens, and then the lead comes back and says, hey, this is above my budget. Well, really we should have had that conversation from the beginning, just so that way we can say, okay, this is their budget. Let's keep that in mind. What can we do that's within that budget? And then, like this morning, I was able to give somebody some options like, hey, I know that wasn't in your budget. Here's some options that we can help you out with. We want to be a part of your solution, not a headache. So budgets, I would recommend have that conversation earlier rather than later.
With us, helping and servicing the client, as best as we possibly can. And if we don't know, then we can't, so it's
exactly.
All that information is very important for us to be able to manage the project properly.
Yeah. And, and just for the customers out there, if you get an estimate from a contractor, don't go silent on them. Give them some feedback. You say, hey, this is looking good, or hey, this is a little bit higher, or hey, I got it received. Give me a couple days to go over it with my significant other, or whatever it might be. Feedback is good. Silence is just a killer. Don't go silent on this.
Yep.
All right, let's go to the next one. Timelines, expectations of timelines. Now, Pablo, I don't know how you feel about this, but for me, I always feel like, hey, let's start at the deadline and work backwards, right? When do you need to have this done by? And that's always good because it helps us come up with a realistic timeline. It helps us with our schedule, for one. And two, if they say, hey, I want a porch built by December 12th, well, it's December 7th, so I don't think that's going to happen, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and like you said, working, backwards is if they have a date that they know that they want this done by. For instance, is one project that we had here recently was we were building a theater room on the second level into let me start over. It was a loft, and we were building it into a theater room. The whole purpose of them wanting to do this and by this timeline was because they have like a Friendsgiving, right? So they had like a whole bunch of their friends and cousins and family coming over and all that, and so they knew that they wanted to use that space for that specific event, and so they gave us a time. And we were like, hey, we can do this within this time frame, and that way we can go ahead and we know, hey, what do we need to put into this? When do we need to order materials? All that stuff to make sure that the flow goes smoothly, first of all, and then that way we have enough cushion too, because us as contractors, we always want to have cushion, right? We always there's those rainy days or that material didn't get delivered on time or like anything like that. So it's our responsibility to kind of try to eliminate eliminate as much as possible, but prepare for that, right? Yeah. So if we know a time on they want it by this, then one is we can try to hit that as best as we can. Or two, give them the honest feedback of like, hey, they're wanting a whole house built within a week. It's like, nah, like unfortunately we can't do that. But be honest with them, and say, hey, this is realistic or this is not realistic on this time frame.
Yeah. And if you have a tight time frame and you tell the contractor, hey, I want this porch done by next week. And they're like, yep, we'll do it. We'll do it right away. There's a bit of a red flag there because they're looking for a job really quick, and then they get you locked in the project, and then delay after delay after delay. Just watch out for those red flags who are just so quick to say yes to things. And we've had videos on social media about all that stuff. So just be careful. Make sure you check out reviews and all that stuff for your contractors. For sure. For timelines. The one thing I would say is if you don't have like a specific time you want it to be completed, the question you should be asking is how soon can you get it started and how long will it take, right? For example, if somebody wanted to do like with elevation right now, someone wanted to do a project, they don't have a deadline, but they want it done, they're ready to go. We can actually get started pretty quick because, wintertime is a little slow. So you want to keep your guys busy, and in a situation like that, we can get started pretty quickly. And whatever the scope is, we can let you know how long that would take.
Yeah, and just one point that I wanted to add was that it's like you were saying is for the client to watch out, for certain contractors that are really fast to try to get ready, and get started on a project. If it's like you mentioned right now, it's this winter time. So for everybody, construction, remodeling, stuff like that usually slows during the winter time. The holidays are around. Nobody wants their house taken apart and, demo and stuff like that happening when they're having family over and friends and stuff. But if it's during normal season, where everybody should be relatively busy, if the contractor's telling you, they can start tomorrow. Not saying it's every case, but it's something to definitely look into. Is why can you start tomorrow? Why you don't have any other projects going on? Why is it that you don't have any other projects going on?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And like you mentioned, is go and look at those reviews. Reviews are key. Do they have a website? Do they have social media platforms?
Exactly.
Have those social media platforms been updated, frequently, or is it something where, hey, I posted something on Instagram a year ago of a project that we did, and that's the most recent thing that I have. That's something very important as the client to go ahead and look at those and vet your contractor. That all goes along with it. Is go ahead and ask the tough questions that a lot of contractors unfortunately is like, hey, they're not taking those pictures and videos of projects, or they're not getting that much in right now. And like, nothing to say against anybody or anything, but if you're trying to work with a seasoned contractor, then those are the things that you need to ask to make sure that you have the right person in place and some experienced team, and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great. So we'll move on to the next one, communication, which is one of the big things that we at Elevation are really big on, because that's one of the biggest complaints I hear from people regarding contractors, is just the lack of communication. And I get it, especially the guys who not only do they swing hammers, but they're the project managers. They order the material, they do all that stuff, right? It's hard for them to communicate all day long when they're busy doing the work. Totally get it. That's why we have a very strong back office admin team where we are all on the same page. We know what's going on with these projects. And, Pablo is out checking out projects, but, he's busy. Alma's there to back up, right? So we do have a very strong team in the background to keep that communication flowing. And then Pablo just today got a 5-star review just because of his communication. 10 out of 10 is what they said. So it's extremely important. And I would say, when you start working with a contractor, ask them, like, who's my primary point of contact during this project? And they should be able to say, hey, it's me, but I do get busy, blah, blah, blah. I do have a team to support me, and they can also keep you up to date of what the project is going. What do you think, Pablo?
Yeah, it hasn't always been that 10 out of 10 for me. Being honest, all right? It's about honesty, right? We talked about that.
Exactly.
Like you said, I understand 100%. I was in those shoes for sure. Before, we teamed up, was as project manager, APAR, the whole thing, managing the projects, trying to do the social media stuff and all that, plus trying to keep, communication between the client and the subs, making sure everything is running properly.
Exactly.
So it can be for sure a feat, something that's very difficult to do. But that's why, like you mentioned, that Elevation is we have the team that's prepared to handle those type of projects that, that's not going to be a problem. And I feel like, as the one thing I really, really love about being on this team is there's a checks and balance, right? Is so everybody has their own roles, but everybody is checking in on the other, is making sure hey, if it didn't get done, or if this, we haven't followed up with this person, or we are following up with this person. And so, having that team atmosphere is definitely the key ingredient to having a very successful project management company.
Yeah, we have these daily reports that we send out every day, and we go back and forth and about updates and things like that. That's why we're all up to date on our projects. But full disclosure, just like what you were saying, the honesty piece, it hasn't always been like that with Elevation from the beginning. I was doing pretty well when I started Elevation, and then we had 3 projects going on. It was easy to keep those updated. But when it was just me and I had 12 projects going on, then I started getting hey, Chris, I never hear from you. What's going on? Are you working on my project? Well, the reality is we are working on your project. I'm just bouncing around all over the place, right? And that's when I started hiring the team. We got a good team, and I said, hey, look, as I'm driving around, your job is to communicate to the owners to let them know what's going on. And from there, we just kind of grew that, and it's been very beneficial in helping out with Pablo and I. You just have our focus is on the project and stuff, and then the team, their job is just to keep the communication flowing. So it's been great. It's been really good. Couldn't do it without the team for sure.
For sure. Good man.
All right. Next one, permits. So the contractor should know whether or not that job needs a permit or not. And if so, then you want to ask, are there going to be any challenges? And it all depends where you're located. So like, for example, the city of Houston is kind of challenging a little bit sometimes with, not sometimes, but with the permitting stuff. And, it is what it is. They're a big city. They got a lot of projects going on, right? So if you're working in a major city, typically it's going to be a little on the slower side. If you're working in the county, it's a little bit better sometimes because the county doesn't have as much, and they can process those permits a little bit quicker. But just remember that the permits can affect the schedule. So you're pretty much at the mercy of the city schedule. Anything to add to that, Pablo?
Permitting is especially, when we're doing new home builds or we're doing rehabs for investors, where we're demoing out pretty much almost the whole house, and we're adding foundation, rough plumbing, rough electrical. We're adding the, framing, 2,000 square feet to a house, things like that. Is there's a lot of, there's a lot of permitting that's involved. The inspections on top of that, you have to know how to handle the inspections and what they're looking for.
Right.
So that way you're not slowing the process down of the build more than what it already is being slowed down from having to pull the permits and waiting on the inspections. I had, some experiences during COVID, at least here in Harris County, where the permitting office was running extra slow, compared to normal because of people working from home. They weren't able to do certain things from home. They had to communicate to the office. And so it was really stressful during that time.
Yeah.
But, having a team that knows how to handle that and trying to move the process as fast as possible is always, something good to definitely have. And, I mean, whether it's a smaller project, like, we were walking that one job that was an attic, build out, dealing with, HOAs, if we needed to pull any kind of permits for framing in regards to that, and dealing with the larger jobs, it's always important, because you can get yourself into some really hot water if you don't pull the proper permits and you don't know what the inspector is looking for, because some inspectors are nice and they'll point it out for you. Some inspectors will come on the site and they'll just walk off site and not even say a word to you, because you didn't have it ready. And then it's like, you try to go and ask them like, hey, like what did I do, or what's going on? What was missing? Oh, well, you should know, was, is some answers that you'll get from some inspectors, depending on what kind of day they're having. And the thing that's kind of unique about Houston is Harris County engulfs a lot of Houston. And then you have all of the surrounding counties, like you have Waller County, and you have, Hockley, and you have, all the things that Montgomery County up north in the Woodlands and Conroe and stuff like that. And where you go and you change to, because we work in all of those counties, not just in Harris County. Right. Is you have to, everything changes slightly. There's little details that you'll have when you change counties and you change jurisdiction, that it does, call for you sometimes, hey, we're experts and we're very knowledgeable on things, but hey, we're always learning, right? There's always new things that are happening. There's always things that are getting updated on code. I mean, if you look at builds that happened, in the 90s and now builds that are happening now, or if you even go back to the 60s and all that, when we were using lead-based paint and asbestos products and stuff like that. And now, you can't use any of those different products and stuff. So it's like, code is always updating, code is changing. So it is, having a team like Elevation on your team to be able to support you in those ways is definitely a big resource.
Yeah, just on a side note, just regards to codes, and they do change a lot. And I wouldn't say a lot, they do change. And so you need to be sure that your contractor is on top of those changes. So for us, we're members of the Greater Houston Builders Association, the National Association of Home Builders, and the Texas Association of Builders. So they have a lot of resources. They have classes on code changes and things. So be sure, look on their website, of your contractor's website, and be sure they are members of similar agencies, because those agencies have good education resources to keep everyone on the same page on updates on things. So before we go to the next one, we'll just kind of review here. The bullet points I've got here is: number one, knowing what your vision is, know what you want to do. Two, being honest with your expectations. Talk about your budget. Talk about your timelines, communication, permits, and the next one is payments. So obviously, your project's going to cost money. There's going to be exchange of money. I always tell people, do not exchange money unless there's a contract signed. If there's no contract signed, no money goes, okay? And then understand what your deposit's going to be. And in that contract, it should have your payment schedule, your deposit, progress payments, and when that's going to get paid, and then when the final bill is going to get paid. So a common payment schedule would be like 50% deposit, and then after about halfway done, 50% done, another 25%. And then at the end of the project, it would be 25% more. After the final walkthrough, blue tape inspection, and everyone's happy and on the same page, final payment is due. That's typical, not always. Some people handle it a little bit different, but anything to add on that, Pablo?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really important. I have a little bit of experience in this when here in Houston, Harvey happened, whatever year that was. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of contractors coming in from out of state. And I mean, they were, a lot of people were, paying contractors that deposit, no contract, no nothing. And then they wouldn't even see them the next day. They were gone out of state with their money, no work done. The insurance wasn't going to, pay out any more than what they had already agreed to pay out on. So mm-hmm. It does get into hot water. A contract is very important, like you had mentioned, Chris, because it holds, both parties to what their role is in this project, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, client is to, provide the funds in that for us to be able to operate and do the proper things that we need to have done. Us, to be able to make sure that we're constructing and we're building and we're buying the materials and doing the logistics side and managing the project, everything that comes along with construction to happen, and for to protect the client from contractors like that give mm-hmm. All the rest of the really good contractors like us a bad name, to where hey, they're just con artists almost, if you will. Is they're just taking off with money and not doing any work whatsoever. So that was something that I think in Houston here specifically left a lot of bad taste in people's mouths after that happened. And, people were really wary of like, hey, should I work with, a contractor or do I need to go a different route, or how can I make this work? And, I've had clients bring that up to me, from time to time. And it's like, hey, this is why we have a contract, and this is why we do the certain processes, and this is why we have the certain procedures in place. Mm-hmm. But to protect you, and then also obviously to protect ourselves, because it does go both ways, to where some contractors shouldn't, but start work, and order the materials and get started on the job, and then the client doesn't hold up their end, and there's no payment coming in on that from the client, and now the contractor is stuck with the bill, and there's really nothing that you can do about it, because unfortunately you didn't have a signed contract in place. So goes back to, hey, I think that's, Chris, you're really, really big on it, is protecting everybody that's involved in that.
Exactly.
So like you said, it's a win-win situation at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's the role of a contract, is to make sure everyone is protected, and I'm a big believer in that. I've gotten screwed at the beginning of our journey. We first started, you don't think about a lot of things, and then but after a while, as you make mistakes, the contract gets better, and it's better for all who are involved. And make sure in that contract, just kind of on a side note, in that contract, you have to have your payment schedule, your scope of work, how much that's going to cost. And it's going to be signed and initialed by both you and the contractor. So don't start the job, don't exchange money until that contract is signed. All right, so moving on to the next one would be change orders. Now, I don't like change orders. Pablo doesn't like change orders. It's just an awkward, tough conversation to have. So when we give out our estimate, it's like, okay, based on the scope of work we talk about, this is how much we expect this project to cost. And we stick to that. The times when it will be a change order is if, one, the scope of work changes. Like we're in the middle of the project and the owner says, hey, I changed my mind. I want to do this, this, and this, right? So it's going to be a bit of a change order. Maybe it's saving them money, or maybe it's adding more. Who knows? The next one is opening up a wall and finding something that we couldn't see with our initial walkthrough, and then tearing up the floor and just seeing something on the subfloor that we could not see because of the old flooring was in place. And is there any other scenarios where you can see where there might be a change order?
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes along a little bit of what you're saying, is as far as what's in the walls and we don't know 100%. I mean, we've had plenty of situations, where, we've opened up walls for bathroom remodels, and we're switching the side of where the toilet's at, and there was a ventilation pipe that came out, an additional one than what we had expected, and it had to be moved. We were putting in a pocket door in that wall, so there was nothing that could be really put in that wall. I mean, that's an example of a change order. Those fur downs above older kitchens and all that. Those are commonly used for running electrical and running, HVAC, so running the AC ducts through to get it to certain, areas where they just didn't want to cut the ceiling joists out.
Right.
We always, try to, hey, can we cut open a small square and here and take a look at this and all that? But that's not always what the client wants, is to have little tiny squares all over their house before we get in there and start, demoing out stuff. But it is important to try to do our best, to foresee any of that. But like you mentioned, Chris, it's not always possible. But I mean, for instance, this is like one project that we were doing a complete, home remodel. The kitchen we were doing, they had the fur down that was above the kitchen cabinets. The kitchen cabinets now were just the standard. I think they're like 36 inch, and we wanted to go to the 41s that go all the way to the ceiling. And so when we opened it up, we weren't able to poke holes in and see what was in there, but I'm like, hey, there's definitely something in there. We just don't know what's in there. And so I was like, maybe some electrical and some plumbing. No, they ran the AC ducts in there. The electrical was ran
everything
right there. So we had to actually, I mean, that's a change order, is like, we had to figure out, it's the time and the extra material and the labor of figuring out how do we run these ducts without, air ducts to be able to get it to the registers that we need to get them to without at the most cost effective way, right? Like we can't just go and cut a whole bunch of ceiling joists and do all that. And, it's like, that's going to be way too expensive. Plus is like structurally, should we do that? Probably not. So it's like trying to find the way of least resistance to get that ran the way that it needs to where it's to code, it works and it functions properly, and it's not an eyesore. It's like, no, you don't want to like do something and then you just like, you did it because it was the most cost effective way, but yet now it's like the project looks off, and that this project was a remodel and it wasn't like that originally. Whereas, Chris, we've talked about this before, is like we go in and we try to, hey, this is how the house was, this is how it was built. We don't want to know that like that elevation was, that elevation remodel, or we want to know that elevation remodel. Let me phrase that. But we want to make it seem that, hey, this was done in a professional manner where this looks cosmetically pleasing to everybody. We can't really know how much that's going to cost until we get in there and we see, okay, like for instance, on the electrical too, how many runs were in there? I can say, okay, to the electrician, we got this run and this run and this run, and we need to have it here. But if we don't know exactly how many total lines were in there, then how can I really get an accurate price on the change order, if you will,
Right. Yeah. And I would say, just for the audience there to protect themselves from change orders, for the possibility of change orders. One, you want to have that conversation with the contractor. Hey, how do you handle change orders? But when you look at the estimate, let's just say, for example, you get an estimate and you get like this paragraph and then a final price. That's bad. You don't want that because there's no transparency in that estimate. You need line item estimates, and each line item has to have a scope, right? Cabinets. Well, what kind of cabinets? Are you going to have shakers? Are you going to have white? Are they going to be painted? Or how big are they going to be, right? You want all that stuff detailed. That way you can kind of, as the project's going along, you check it off. Okay, this one is done, and this one is done. This one's done? And that way there's no ambiguity where the contractor will come up and say, oh, I didn't know you wanted that. It's written out. Everyone's on the same page from the beginning, and there's no room for error there or change orders. Cool. So I would say the number 9 is the final walkthrough. So, you can ask about, hey, how do you handle the final walkthrough? What does that look like? And when you do the final walkthrough, ask them like, hey, what if I find some stuff that needs to be done? Like, how does that work when it comes to payments? Can I just hold off payment until all that's done? For us, we like to make sure that the project is 100% done and you're satisfied before we start talking about money. Pablo, anything to add to that, or can you maybe kind of talk about what a final walkthrough would look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we would want to walk through with our trades, before we even get the client involved and look
Yep.
at everything.
Right.
I like to use the blue tape method,
Yep. Yep.
sometimes
It's
it'll look like,
easiest.
blue tape just threw up all over this house. But, it's like there's little details, that, I mean, think about it as like, texture can be really delicate to deal with, and it's like, hey, this is a little off, or like maybe this needs a little sanded, you can kind of see this joint a little bit more here. For instance, these baseboards, it's like, hey, this baseboard, this cut wasn't 100%, and
Yeah.
it was filled in a little too much or something like that. But that's stuff that, us as the project manager, or as the construction company coming in is like, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to try to handle as much of that stuff as possible. But,
Right.
it's like, hey, the more eyes on it, the better, right? Because it's like, I'm going to see something that maybe you're not going to see, and the client's going to see something that maybe we're not going to see. So we'd go through and do that first, and then, yes, a final walkthrough, come in, we'd schedule a time with the client. Come in and, hey, we'd go over all of the rooms, and individual line items that we did. Hey, the drywall was good. The paint is we put enough coats on it to where there was no transparency or little spots on it. The baseboards were caulked properly, and the paint was done, done well, and no brush marks, stuff like that. We spray the majority of all of our trim work, so you really shouldn't have any brush marks or anything like that, unless there was maybe some kind of a touch up that was needed at the end of it after it was already sprayed. But most of the time our guys are going back in there and we're spraying it again. So that way you have that, that clean, flawless finish on all of that trim. Checking out electrical, outlets, making sure everything was wired properly. So I think, what I would do is, we just start room by room and then just go over. And if there's any final things that the client is maybe not 100% satisfied with, then, hey, we get that blue tape back out and we put it. It's a little bit easier because, I can go ahead and I can put a list together and say, hey, this area, and this area for, the guys that we're working with. But the blue tape is literally like, hey, that's the spot right there.
Exactly.
So it's like there's less confusion. Everybody's on the same page. The thing, everything gets done the way it's supposed to get done. And the client at the end of the day is happy. So, and then once we're done, we walk through everything. If there is anything, then from there, then as soon as, I'm walking out that door, I'm getting on the phone with whatever trades that we need. Hey, this and this and this, I've taken the pictures. We've documented what needs to be done. That's been uploaded into Buildertrend. We're doing all of that stuff, all the things that we need to do. And then the client is expecting us to come back, within a day or two to be able to go ahead and make that done. To complete that. And then from there, we have a happy client. And the expectation has been met, and our subs are happy, we're happy, and we've created that win-win, which every project we want is to be that win-win situation.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the key thing there is what you said, is getting the trades and doing the walkthrough first before you get the client involved, because then you do that, you do it with intention. Majority of the stuff is going to get found, and then when the client walks through, it's like, okay, it's all done, right?
Yeah.
And we certainly want everyone to win on this one. We want the client to be happy. Our goal with our company, Elevation, is that we want to earn that 5-star review at the end. We want it to be that they really want that, like they're eager to get on Google and give us that 5-star review. And that's how we approach every project. And we get excited about that. So those are 9 points. There's more to it, but we don't want to overwhelm everybody. But when you talk with a contractor, these 9 points will certainly help you out. And what we'll do is we'll put together a checklist for you. So if you're out of state, out of our operating area, you can have that checklist with you, and you can kind of go through that as you're talking to your contractor. If you're working with us, that's great. You can still use that checklist. Which is fine because we created it, but we'll easily answer all those questions for you, and you can listen to this podcast and know that you've got someone you can trust. So, cool. Anything else to add to that, Pablo?
I think we're good.
Yeah, I think that was a good one. I appreciate Pablo coming on. So Pablo is going to be on here more often. We're going to think about some things that are going to be beneficial for customers out there who, maybe they're thinking about or asking some questions that we're hearing quite often, and we'll just put a podcast together to help answer those questions. our role really is to educate the public on how to work with your contractor. But yeah, I appreciate it. Stay tuned. We're going to have weekly episodes with the Caffeinated Contractor, and hit subscribe and all that other good stuff, so that way we can spread the word and help educate as many people as we can.
And work with elevation.
That's right. All right. Thanks.